August 2025. Deep inside the gray industrial plains of eastern Ukraine, a column of Russian trucks moves toward the Donbas front, loaded with ammunition meant to fuel a long-awaited counteroffensive. Then, in less than a minute, the silence shatters. A single rocket streaks across the sky and detonates with surgical precision. The explosion is so intense that the convoy disappears in fire and dust, leaving behind a crater the size of a football field. The Russian advance halts instantly. No one knows where the strike came from, but intelligence officers already suspect a weapon that has rewritten the rules of war, one that combines speed, accuracy, and reach unlike anything seen before. To understand what happened next, we must trace how this single system reshaped the battlefield across Ukraine. On the 13th of June 2025, a US-supplied M142 HIMARS rocket system punched through a column of Russian ammunition trucks near Donetsk's occupied territory. The vehicles were carrying vital shells, fuel, and supplies intended to support a major Russian push into the Donbas. Footage and open-source reports indicate that when the missile struck, the blast triggered a massive explosion that engulfed several trucks and nearby storage sites, destroying the convoy and halting the flow of ammunition to the front. After the strike, the Russian units responsible for supply faced immediate chaos. With their route broken and vehicles disabled, Moscow's logistics chain was forced to scramble. Russian commanders ordered reconnaissance teams using Orlan-10 unmanned aerial vehicles and mobile radar systems to locate the HIMARS launcher responsible for the hit. These UAVs flew over occupied territory, scanning for heat signatures and launch movements, while radar stations attempted to pick up the HIMARS battery's emissions. The search signaled a shift. Russian forces acknowledged they were now the hunted. The disruption reached beyond tactical annoyance. With the supply lines severed, Russian artillery units found their stocks of shells dwindling, forcing them to withdraw or delay planned attacks. According to Ukrainian intelligence analysis and Western observers, this marked the first major logistical collapse for Russia, caused by a precision strike tool. The offensive that Moscow had expected to launch in Donbas stalled unexpectedly, as supply trucks stopped moving and ammunition depots were left vulnerable. Western military analysts later described the incident as a tactical turning point in the war. Whereas previous engagements had seen large volumes of artillery and ammunition flowing steadily toward the front, this single HIMARS-launched rocket rewrote that flow. A weapon system that could strike deep, move quickly, and hide afterward forced Russian personnel to rethink their assumptions. According to the open-source archive, the Forensic Archive, this event demonstrated how one accurate strike can derail weeks of planning and blunt a mass-fire doctrine. From the supply road explosion near Donetsk to the radar-mounted Russian hunt for the launcher, the episode laid bare a new reality. Logistics lines that were once considered safe behind the front are now exposed. Russian commanders realized they could no longer move ammunition trucks with impunity, nor trust that their rear depot sits outside the strike envelope. That realization alone forced them into reaction. They altered convoy routes, slowed down movement at night, dispersed their stocks, and allocated extra assets to defend supply lines. By doing so, they gave Ukraine and its allies a strategic gift. The opponent diverted resources simply because they could not assume safety. But this was only the beginning. Soon, HIMARS would hunt not just trucks, but Russia's most valuable military assets. On 24th July 2025, Ukrainian forces unleashed a wave of coordinated strikes using their US-supplied M142 HIMARS units, backed by long-range drones and artillery teams. These targeted not only supply trucks but key Russian firepower elements, radar arrays, S-300 launcher complexes, and ammunition depots deep behind frontline lines. Reconnaissance drones supplied the precise coordinates required, and HIMARS rockets delivered the blow, allowing Ukrainian artillery and air units to exploit the gap. In one documented surge of attacks, Ukrainian intelligence and Western observers reported that more than a dozen major Russian logistics hubs were hit within just a 2-week span. According to one summary, Ukrainian rocket strikes destroyed over 30 Russian military logistics centers in recent weeks, significantly reducing Russia's attacking potential. Those strikes represent the kind of disruption that reshapes battlefields. When nodes of supplies, ammo, and radar vanish, the attacker's advantage shrinks fast. Because of these precision attacks, the Russian war machine began to falter. For example, the destruction of radar and air defense installations cleared the way for Ukrainian jets and drones to operate with far fewer threats overhead. Western analysts attribute a reduction of roughly 40% in Russian artillery shelling density to this emerging dynamic. Though exact figures remain classified, the trend appears consistent. Diminished firepower, slower barrages, and fewer mass rocket salvos. These operations represent a new model of hybrid warfare. The sequence is clear. Reconnaissance drones fly ahead and surveil vital Russian systems. They relay coordinates to HIMARS launchers, hidden or on the move. HIMARS fires guided rockets. Ukrainian ground and air units then advance into the resulting breach. Each strike, therefore, is more than a missile launch. It is a coordinated theater action that synchronizes intelligence, firepower, and mobility. To observers, this integration signals a turning point in how Ukraine fights. From a strategic viewpoint, this shift matters because it denies Russia its strength and depth. Historically, Moscow relied on layered defense systems, heavy artillery barrages, and robust supply chains. With HIMARS compressing those layers, the Russian doctrine of static firepower becomes vulnerable. As a military magazine put it, Ukraine's receipt of Western precision systems enabled strikes deep into Russian positions, creating a competition where precision and integration now hold greater sway than sheer volume. On the Donetsk axis, Russian forces found themselves reacting more than attacking. Supply nodes that once sat safe several tens of kilometers behind the front now required hardened bunkers, constant relocation, and multi-layered protection. Radar sites and S-300 launchers were forced to hide or retreat, curtailing their coverage of Ukrainian air assets. Artillery forces, deprived of stable supply lines, shifted from offensive operations to defensive fire and risk mitigation. As Russian losses mounted, Ukrainian commanders sensed an opening. The tempo of operations increased, allowing them to press forward where artillery earlier had constrained them. Because key Russian assets were offline or damaged, Ukrainian infantry had room to maneuver with less fear of immediate counterfire. This dynamic, cultivated by HIMARS-enabled strikes, reshaped the frontline calculus. Attrition by volume gave way to precision by planning. It is important to note that while the exact figures vary, the trend is supported by multiple sources. One Al Jazeera report from July 2022 claimed that Ukrainian rocket attacks have destroyed more than 30 military logistical facilities and significantly reduced Russia's attacking potential. That early confirmation aligns with more recent intelligence assessments. A logistics system under pressure yields fewer shells, slower movements, and less punch at the front. By July 2025, the cumulative effect of these precision operations was clear. Russian commanders were forced into reactive posture, Ukrainian forces obtained the initiative, and the battlefield started to change shape. The key takeaway is not just that individual targets were destroyed, but that they were destroyed in a sequence that forced the adversary to reorder. That reordering drains resources, extends timelines, and increases risk. As Russia's losses grew, the Kremlin's response became inevitable to hunt the hunter. On 12 August 2025, Russian reconnaissance stepped up its campaign, turning the tables on the launchers that had hounded its supply lines. Satellite imagery, intercepted radio chatter, and airborne surveillance by Orlan 10 drones all pointed to the same goal: locate the mobile HIMARS units that had become the thorn in Moscow's side. The skies over eastern Ukraine and western Russia suddenly held more than drones, they held trackers, signal analysts, and radar teams working together to trace launch and reload patterns. The result was a shift in the battle's tempo. Once a HIMARS unit was identified, Russian forces responded with long-range ballistic missiles, specifically the 9K-72 Iskander system, that could reach targets hundreds of kilometers behind the front. These missiles, carried on mobile launchers deep inside Russian-held sectors, allowed Moscow to strike at the rear of Ukrainian operations rather than just engage frontline units. Sources confirm that Russian forces used these to hit what they believed were HIMARS positions. In late August, a HIMARS battery was destroyed, marking the first confirmed loss of such a system in this theater. It proved that while Ukraine and its Western backers had achieved a degree of surprise and dominance, Russia was capable of adaptation and could still generate effective counterstrikes. Reports vary on location and exact unit, but the event underscored the game's new stakes. The hunter became the hunted. These duels exposed the changing nature of the Donbas battle zone. Success no longer depended solely on brute firepower or mass saturation. Speed, camouflage, and timing entered the core of the contest. HIMARS batteries had to shoot and vanish rapidly. Russian missile brigades had to detect, aim, and fire before the target moved. The margin for error shrank. A launch pad visible for 1 minute meant a strike within minutes. A delay in detection meant a missed opportunity. In effect, logistics and firepower are no longer separate, they merge into a new form of mobility-centered conflict. Another shift. The locations once considered safe behind the front supply dumps, secondary roads, hidden launch sites became vulnerable. With Russian eyes on HIMARS convoys, Ukrainian forces adjusted. They minimized exposure, limited reload times, dispersed vehicles, and improved camouflage. Meanwhile, Russian planners shifted too. Some missiles now targeted reconnaissance drones, others targeted mobile radar nodes, and many more aimed at disrupting the shoot-and-scoot model. This interplay of tactics defines the current phase of the war. From a broader perspective, Russia's ability to strike back at HIMARS suppressed, though did not eliminate, Ukrainian dominance of precision strike. The destruction of one launcher carried symbolic weight. It showed that a system backed by Western funding and technology could be countered. But the underlying story remains. Ukraine's advantage derived from integration drones, HIMARS, air support, and infantry acting together. Russian reaction exposed a weakness. Its defense must now divert resources to cover these mobile threats, which dilutes its offensive energy elsewhere. It is important to underline that even while Russia adapted, it did so at substantial cost. Seeking to locate HIMARS meant deploying additional drones, radar systems, electronic warfare assets, and launch crews deeper into the contested zone. That dispersal of resources, in turn, allowed Ukrainian forces more freedom elsewhere. In effect, the Russian counterstrike strategy created new windows of opportunity for Ukraine. Analysts note that when an adversary must guard against high-value mobile threats, he risks stretching his coverage and leaving other nodes exposed. By the end of August 2025, the battlefield had entered a new rhythm. Ukrainian HIMARS-equipped units had to assume launch positions for shorter times and withdraw faster. Russian brigades focused on intelligence and long-range response rather than frontline breakthroughs. The contest of attrition transformed into a contest of motion. Every movement, every reload, every signal matters. What began as a precision strike on a convoy in Donbas now evolves into a layered clash of system versus system. Yet, even under pressure, the difference in design philosophy between both sides remained striking and decisive. When comparing the American-built M142 HIMARS with Russian rocket systems such as the BM-21 Grad, BM-30 Smerch, and the TOS-1A, the difference in doctrine becomes immediately obvious. HIMARS launches guided GMLRS rockets that rely on GPS, or inertial navigation, to strike a single target with minimal waste, and this has been repeatedly emphasized in recent technical documentation. For example, Lockheed Martin describes the GMLRS as the 70-kilometer sniper rifle that reduces the number of rockets needed to defeat targets. Meanwhile, Russian MLRS platforms lean heavily on volume. They fire large salvos to saturate an area, accepting lower accuracy and higher collateral risk. HIMARS systems can hit fixed targets at ranges of up to about 70 to 80 kilometers under current munitions supplied in Ukraine, with development underway for longer-range variants. Because of this range and the precision guidance, each rocket in a HIMARS round often lands within a few meters of its mark, which means fewer rounds are needed, less ammunition is consumed, and fewer logistic burdens pile up. The Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, notes that these capabilities shape the totality of the battlefield by reducing enemy depth and forcing adversaries to react. By contrast, systems like GRAD, SMERCH, and TOS-1A follow a mass-fire approach. The BM-21 GRAD, for instance, can fire 40 rockets in about 20 seconds, but its accuracy is limited, and its effective radius is large. The BM-30 SMERCH launches 12 heavy 300mm rockets intended to hit large or deeply buried targets, but again, accuracy is secondary to volume. The TOS-1A is even more extreme. Mounted on a tank chassis and designed for saturation attacks with thermobaric warheads, its range is short, only a few kilometers, but the impact area is vast. Analysts estimate that Russia must expend at least 10 to 20 times more ammunition to achieve effects similar to what one HIMARS rocket can do. This increased consumption adds to logistic strain, exposes supply lines, and elevates risk to civilians and infrastructure. Although exact Russian figures are secret, Western commentary highlights that the volume fire doctrine imposes heavier collateral costs and slower tempo recovery than precision-guided strikes. The shift from spray and pray to click and hit plays out in real time. What the contrast underscores is two fundamentally different philosophies of warfare. HIMARS represents precision and economy. Fewer rounds, lower exposure, faster repositioning, and less damage to non-combatants. Russian MLRS represent volume and saturation. Many rounds, large effects, high consumption, and inevitably greater collateral. In the war in Ukraine, this contrast is not theoretical. HIMARS-enabled operations are changing how Ukraine fights, forcing Russian commanders to adapt, disperse, and defend what were once safe zones. In practical terms on the battlefield, that means Ukrainian HIMARS units can shoot, relocate, and avoid counter-battery fire more effectively. Russian forces, because they rely on large salvos that leave signatures and require supply convoys, become easier to detect and more vulnerable. The result is that precision systems impose costs on the mass-fire opponent beyond the immediate target damage. They force doctrinal change, degrade morale, and strain logistics. As this phase of the war continues, the philosophical gap carries implications for future conflicts. Allies and partners observing Ukraine note that accuracy and integration of intelligence assets may become the dominant paradigm. Meanwhile, adversaries relying on mass fire will face increasing difficulty. Simply holding large stockpiles of rockets does not guarantee battlefield dominance when fewer but smarter rounds can change the game. And when precision meets deception, the psychological battlefield begins. In August 2022, the Ukrainian armed forces introduced a surprising layer into their battlefield playbook: wooden replicas of the HIMARS launch vehicle. These mock-ups were constructed to look virtually identical to the real system from the air, fooling satellite imagery and infrared sensors alike. According to a detailed investigation by the Washington Post, Russia fired at least 10 caliber cruise missiles at these decoys in just the first weeks of deployment, burning millions of dollars in ammunition. The purpose of this strategy was clear: protect the actual HIMARS units by drawing enemy fire to false targets, while real launchers moved, rearmed, and fired elsewhere. Russian command and control efforts, guided by drone feeds and radar signatures, registered the decoys as valid high-value targets. One senior Ukrainian official quoted in the Post said, "When the UAVs see the battery, it's like a VIP target." Because Russia treated these replicas as genuine, they wasted expensive long-range missiles on nothing but wooden trucks. Each caliber missile reportedly cost several $1 million, while the decoys themselves were built at a small fraction of that cost. Analysts called the scheme the cheapest billion-dollar distraction of the war. While Russian forces focused resources on hunting the decoys, Ukrainian commanders used the pause to reposition actual HIMARS systems, reload ammunition, and prepare fresh strikes. The decoy strategy effectively widened the gap between what Russia believed it hit and what really existed on the ground. In turn, this forced Moscow to divert reconnaissance, radar assets, and missile stocks into chasing phantom threats rather than supporting offensive operations. From a tactical viewpoint, the decoy program also offered secondary benefits. It complicated Russian intelligence estimates of Ukrainian firepower and created doubt among their targeting crews. If one launcher could be fake, how many more might be? That uncertainty slows reaction and increases risk. Furthermore, the decoy campaign bought valuable time for Ukraine's precision strikes to take hold and for logistical lines to reform behind safer fronts. The initiative illustrates a broader shift. In the war's current phase, reality and perception become weapons in their own right. Deception amplifies precision. The real HIMARS systems still do the hard job of hitting high-value targets, but the fake versions draw fire, conserve real assets, and lower the cost of survival. In essence, Ukraine turned the concept of defense on its head by making the enemy spend and expose themselves first. This shadow game also signals an evolution in how smaller armies can exploit asymmetry. Rather than matching quantity with quantity, Ukraine matched cunning with scarcity. The strategy proves that when one side lacks mass, it can still gain initiative by forcing the other to waste resources, reconsider assumptions, and operate under stress. This tactical chess game revealed a deeper truth. HIMARS was no longer just a launcher. It had become a symbol. From early 2022 onward, the M142 HIMARS came to embody the American way of war: fewer shots, higher accuracy, and minimal harm to civilians. The United States Department of Defense reported that when these systems arrived in Ukraine, they enabled multiple, precision-guided rockets to be launched from mobile units. For Ukrainian commanders, each successful hit became proof that Western technology delivered that precision could win where blunt force might fail. For Russia, the impact was sobering. Its reliance on mass firepower and long supply chains suddenly looked like a weakness. Analysts noted that large volumes of artillery and rockets alone could no longer guarantee dominance when an opponent brought pinpoint capability and intelligence together. According to the Center for Strategic and International Studies, Russia has lost significant amounts of equipment and momentum since precision weapons entered the fight. Military economists estimate that losses connected to HIMARS strikes, including destroyed equipment, ammunition dumps, and disrupted logistics, exceeded $1 billion in destroyed value, although exact public data remains limited. This monetary cost adds to the symbolic cost. One weapon system shifting the narrative. Beyond the battlefield, HIMARS began to influence global military thinking. Its presence in Ukraine sent signals to allies and adversaries alike. In the Indo-Pacific region, for example, Taiwan conducted its first test firing of US-supplied HIMARS in May 2025, underscoring how this system is part of a broader strategic architecture. Military planners in NATO and partner nations now study the Ukrainian experience to inform decisions on procurement, doctrine, and alliance interoperability. Thus, HIMARS is both tool and icon. It stands for a shift from quantity to quality, from predictable supply lines to agile strikes, from mass to precision. Yet the symbol also carries a warning. Such systems are not invincible. Logistics still matter, and the opponent will adapt. The story of HIMARS in Ukraine is more than a record of victories. It is proof that precision can reshape a war. Since its first strikes in Donbas in June 2022, the system has shown that intelligence and accuracy can cripple a larger army built on numbers. Russian convoys, supply lines, and air defense sites fell not from mass bombing, but from data and timing. Reports from Reuters confirm that HIMARS changed how Russia moves and defends, forcing it to scatter its logistics and hide behind longer lines. What began as a single launch has become a global lesson. Power now belongs to those who strike smart, not those who strike hard. And as this new era of precision unfolds, America's weapon stands as its symbol. If you want more clear factual analysis like this, subscribe now to Military Force.